or put them on silent mode? Can I have silence in here? Can you hear me downstairs in the seminar hall? Okay, good afternoon, students. Can you all hear me in the seminar hall on the first floor? Can you raise your hands, please? First floor seminar hall students, if you can hear me. Great, thank you so much. Okay, so for all the students, I hope the cell phones are on silent mode or switched off. Please ensure that you're not texting to each other, etc.
First floor, another batch of 150 students.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
On behalf of the Birla Institute of Management Technology, I would like to welcome all present here today to the talk by Dr. Ajit Ranade on current economic crisis in India, Way Out, organized by the Eco Chamber BIMTech. Since August 2011, the value of the rupee has depreciated from $1 equivalent to approximately 44 rupees to as low as $1 equivalent to 68.8 rupees. One of the key reasons ascribed for this sharp depreciation has been the announcement made by the United States Federal Reserve Chairman, Mr. Ben Bernanke, regarding quantitative easing. While, on the other hand, critics argue that the fall in the rupee is more a reflection of the structural problems in the current and capital accounts of the Indian economy. In addition, the current account deficit and the fiscal deficit of India has been a cause of concern for the government. The topmost worrisome thought in all our minds is, what is the way out of this current economic crisis? Today we have amongst us Dr. Ajit Ranade, Chief Economist of the Aditya Birla Group, an Indian multinational conglomerate, to enlighten us and give us his valuable insight on the same. I would now request Director Sir Dr. Chaturvedi to kindly deliver the welcome address.
Good afternoon, dear students and my faculty colleagues. It's a great privilege to have Dr. Ajit Ranade as a speaker to speak on one of the contemporary topic which is most relevant for all decision makers in corporate sector as well as MBA students. Dr. Ajit Ranade is member of our Board of Governors. Among all the economists in our country, he has his own place. He has his own voice. When he speaks, not only all TV channels cover it, not only the leaders of FICCI and CII listen him, even I can say that the leaders, business leaders like Sri Kumar Mangalam Birla, who is heading $45 billion Aditya Birla Group, having operations in more than 50 countries. He is also attentively listening whatever is said by Dr. Ajit Ranade. So kindly give a big applause to Dr. Ajit Ranade. So today you will have an opportunity to interact with him. You can raise questions after his speech, which is very interactive, because although he started as a professor, but he is a very interactive professor. He will always start with asking questions. Be ready to face tough questions. So after this lecture, you may kindly search on the net or in your library. You will find lot of his lectures are available on YouTube or worldwide websites, and also you will find that his articles are published regularly by all financial newspapers. So it's a great feeling for us for welcoming Dr. Ajit Ranade today. Thank you.
Dr. Ajit Ranade, Chief Economist of the Aditya Birla Group, has done his doctorate in economics from the Brown University. He is a BTech in electrical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai, and is also an alumni of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He has served as a professor at ICRIA, New Delhi, and was the chief economist at ABN AMRO Bank. He serves as a director on the board of Hindalco Almex Aerospace, a joint venture company of Hindalco and Almex Incorporated of USA. He was Government of India's nominee as independent director of the Multi-Commodity Exchange of India from September 2007 to April 2010. He has also served on various committees of the Reserve Bank of India, most recently in the Committee for Fuller Capital Account Convertibility. He is a member of the board of India Today Economists, chairman of the CII West Zone Subcommittee on Economic Affairs, and the Research Advisory Panel of the Indian Institute of Banking and Finance. Dr. Ranade is a member of the Senate and Advisory Council of IIT Mumbai. He's a columnist with Mumbai Mirror and also writes for the First Port, Business Standard, IBN, etc. He has authored several books. On behalf of BIMTech, it is my privilege to welcome you, sir, and we are indeed obliged to have you here. I would now request Dr. Ranade to kindly address the gathering.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mishra. Can you hear me? So good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for this very, very warm welcome. And I'm really happy and delighted to be back here, but I'm not nervous anymore because this is not my first time to be ragged. The ragging part is over, so I'm now here as part of your family. So I'm very happy, and this is going to be, it's just a ghar ki murgi, I'm not an outsider. And I feel Dr. Chaturvedi said something about television. I already feel that I'm on TV because there's a camera there with a red light on, so I have to be careful. And I believe some of you are here only virtually, not really. So hi to you. So I'm going to speak for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have quick time for Q&A. So I urge you, request you to really ask questions so we can make this more effective and more useful for all of us. And I would request the front benchers not to ask any questions, with due respect to you, because I would really. So you said economic crisis in India, right? So the big crisis for you is, will Infosys come to campus or not? Next year. I think that's the question we need to answer. So I don't want to put Dr. Chaturvedi on the spot, but I thought, economic crisis to hota rahega, but what does it mean in my life and in my immediate, so let's keep that in context. But you see, in some ways, that crisis is touching your own life. Your own life. You're a first student, right? Anybody in second year here in this room? Oh, you're all second year. Okay, sorry. So it touches your life, all of you. So how does it touch your life? Because immediately the job prospects get affected. So we cannot say it is abstract. We don't have to talk about those people below the poverty line or people who have very low, low levels of nutrition, malnutrition coefficient. You don't have to talk about those macro numbers. Sometimes you get glazed. You say India has, whatever, the national debt is 85 trillion rupees. Now this trillion, we don't even know how many zeros it has. Everybody knows how many zeros a trillion has? Okay. That's good to know. But so sometimes those macro numbers tend to make you dazed. It can't relate to your life. But if I say that this year Infosys is going to recruit only 3 people, that is very real to you, right? But if I can explain to you that that decision of Infosys is related to something national or some macro phenomenon, that's the way to understand the economic crisis. So in a way it is very real. Just like it affects your life, it affects the life of a typical household in India. When you talk about onion prices, which of course is a very, hot potato. Onion prices are hot potato in India. So that affects the typical household and so on. So what is there an economic crisis in India? if you measure it by the metric of Infosys coming to your campus, there seems to be, because there was a time when the IT company. By the way, I'm using Infosys only as an example. Please don't take it more than it's just like a small dipstick. I could very well use the example of let's say Birla Sun Life Insurance or Ultratech Cement or something. So it's just as a way of illustration. So is there a crisis in India? By that metric, it looks like it is a somewhat serious. But let me just turn it around a little bit. So India in 2006, we crossed a very important milestone. That milestone was $1 trillion. In India, Indian economy in the world became a $1 trillion economy. $1 trillion means, oh, this word trillion has come again. So I have to tell you how many zeros it has, 12 zeros. 1 followed by 12 zeros. Rupees, dollars. That's right, no? Not getting it. Okay. So it was measured, how do you measure it? In 2006, Indian economy GDP measured in rupees divided by the exchange rate of 2006 was a number greater than $1 trillion. And this was an important milestone to cross, because at that time, not more than a handful, perhaps a dozen countries, dozen economies were of that size. So we were in the top 12, measured in terms of purely dollars, just divide rupees by, I think in 2006 the exchange rate had gone down to 40 or something, or 42. Today, in 2013, 7 years later, we are close to $2 trillion. Same thing, today's exchange rate, today's rupee value of GDP. I hope everybody knows what is GDP, gross domestic product, but there is nothing gross about it. It's pretty, so we are close to 2 trillion. So I'm measuring it in dollars because the dollar is a stable currency, somewhat stable. In the dollar inflation rate, suppose something was costing $5 back in 2006, most probably it is still $5 or maybe $5.50 today. So the dollar tends to be a little stable. So you have $1 trillion in 2006, you have $2 trillion in 2013. So the size of the economy is twice as big, correct? That time, as you know, we were growing at 9%. GDP growth rate, the real growth rate, not that is in real terms, in real amount of steel and cars and all that, actual amount, the real growth rate was 9% at 1 trillion. If your GDP is twice as big, you have to grow only half the rate. See, if this pie, $1 trillion was increasing at the rate of 9%, that means the amount of economic output was increasing at the rate of 9%. That means on $1 trillion, you were adding $90 billion. So on a 2 trillion base, to add the same amount of economic activity, same amount of steel and cement and automobiles, you need to grow at 4.5% to have the same kind of growth. But we are actually growing at 5%. So on that count, it doesn't look all that bad. Of course, we want to, the aspiration is to grow faster. We want to grow at 7 or 8 or even 9%. But at least in our own, I'm not comparing it with China, I'm not comparing it with any other country, I'm just comparing it with our own history. And that too not long time ago, just 7 years ago. We were a $1 trillion economy, we are close to 2 trillion. If our growth rate was X, then even if we grow at half of X, we will still be adding the same amount of output, right? So the good news is that we are actually not growing at 4.5%, we are growing at 5%. And in fact, next year, this growth rate is going to go up, according to me. I mean, of course, this is a forecast, but I think it will go up. So we have grown at 5%. We are probably going to inch up to 5.5, going up to 6 in a couple of years, which means that Infosys will come to your campus. So what is the crisis currently? I think Dr. Mishra in her introductory comments mentioned about currency, so I should talk about a little bit about currency. You see, one of the big challenges for the Indian economy in the last 5-6 years has been inflation. It's not only onion prices, it's also a variety of things, all kinds of food baskets. It's milk, it's eggs, especially protein items, dal, pulses, but it's also not just fruits and vegetables, it's also, of course, it's petrol and diesel, and it's manufacturing input. So one of the problem has been, certainly for consumer prices, Consumer prices have been high. We never have had a sustained phenomenon of almost double digit, 10% inflation rate every year, on almost for 5 years. This is something which I think, if you ask me what is the economic crisis in India currently, we need to really seriously look at why do we have this high inflation. And if I told you that 5 years ago, if you had 100 rupees in your pocket, 100 rupee note in your pocket, and inflation is running at 10% per year, in 5 years, how much value does the 100 rupee lose? Simple question. Roughly, yeah, I know some of you are thinking about compound interest and 1.05 raised to 5. Asani, just simple. If every year there's 10% inflation, means the rupee is losing value at the rate of 10%. The purchasing power is leaking from a bucket. The purchasing power of that 100 rupees is leaking, is decreasing by 10%. That's what inflation is, right? Inflation means loss of purchasing power. When things become more expensive, that 100 rupee note is able to buy something less and less and less. So by simple interest, this is 4th standard arithmetic, not your MBA. 10 plus 10 plus 10 times 5 is 50%. That's strictly not correct because you have to do compounding. But so 100 rupees is worth 50 rupees today. Correct? Yeah. So is it any surprise? Therefore, the purchasing power, the rupee has lost domestic purchasing power by 50%. So is it any surprise to you that the rupee dollar exchange rate went from 40 to 60? What is 50% of 40? 20. So it went from 40, another 20 it lost, it became 60. So the rupee became weaker by roughly 50%. So you cannot have a situation that the rupee is domestically losing purchasing power, so getting weaker and weaker, but remains strong externally. That is just not possible. You cannot have a disconnect between the purchasing power of the rupee inside your own country and the purchasing power of the rupee outside the country, because the exchange rate is nothing but the reflection of rupee's power, purchasing power, externally in the outside world. Is that clear? So it is no surprise, according to me, that the rupee has slid from 40 to 60. Of course, it went to 68. Now we can talk about the volatility and why it was so jumpy. That we can discuss. That's a slight smaller discussion, but basically, roughly from the 40 level, early 40s, it has gone to early 60s in 5 years. And that is fundamentally caused by, I think, the inflationary situation in the country. So much so that when it did not go to 60 fast enough, you'll say, then why did it stick to 44? You said 44, 54 for such a long time, and only after July it jumped up to 60, then 62, 67, then it came back. That is the nature of exchange rates. They don't move linearly and very predictably and smoothly. They move very in a volatile fashion, in a very jerky fashion. And what happened is that because the rupee kept getting closer to 50 rather than depreciating the way it should have according to inflation, it got an artificial strength. When the rupee is not steadily going down the way it should go, when you look at the rate of inflation, when it is stuck at 50 or 48 or 51, when it should be further weaker, it got artificial strength. So what happens when you have artificial strength? When the rupee or domestic rupee is stronger artificially, what happens? Sorry? No, if your domestic currency is stronger compared to vis-a-vis the dollar, what is likely to happen? Only I am being recorded, you are not being recorded. So you can say a wrong answer. Exactly. Imports first. Your imports we live in a globalized world where the borders are open. You can import anything. Many of the things that you are wearing are probably made in China. So imports become relatively more attractive compared to domestically produced things. So domestic producers, if they have to compete against not only each other but imported items, and if the imported item is artificially cheaper because the rupee is artificially strong, you're likely to see greater imports. When you have higher imports and relatively lower growth in exports, what is that called? Current account deficit, that's right. So the current account deficit, when it was widening, one of the reasons was this. that we were having import, and we are seeing imports not only in consumer items like your cell phones or your mobile phones, cell phones or ordinary electronic items, but also big things like turbines. Sorry? No, crude oil I'll come to separately. I'm talking about things which can be competing. Why do we see? We are a country of 120 crore people. Today, 850 million, 85 crore Indians have a cell phone connection. How many of those cell phones are made in India? With due respect and hats off to Micromax and all those companies, but we still have a very large percentage of the cell phones are coming from abroad because they are cheaper. I mean, let's face it, 1,000, 2,000 rupees, can you make a cell phone in Chennai for 2,000 rupees? So one of the reasons is because the imported item will be cheaper when your currency is artificially stronger. So one reason the current account deficit widened is because imports surged and exports did not take off as much. So we are seeing some of that correction. So my reason for feeling optimistic. Now why did we let that slip? We can talk about that, we can criticize government policy and all that. But today we are not here to criticize the government. So I'm just trying to describe the macroeconomic phenomenon. That this is one thing that happened. The current account deficit widened and widened and widened, and it became 4.8 or almost 5% of GDP. So I told you our GDP is close to $2 trillion. 5% of 2 trillion kitna banta hai? $100 billion. Which is, so it is actually 90 billion, the actual number, because it is slightly below 5%. But $90 billion on an exchange rate of 60 is something like 6 lakh crores. 10 lakh crores. 90 into 60, no? Sorry. 6 lakh crores. Okay. $90 billion. But as a percentage of GDP, it was close to 5%. And even in the worst crisis year of modern India, 1991 is called a crisis year because that time we almost had India was down to such a low level of foreign exchange reserves. I'm talking about 1991 when perhaps many of you were not born. 1991, India's foreign exchange reserves had dipped so much that we did not have enough foreign exchange to pay even for 15 days of imports. So typically they measure adequacy of foreign exchange in terms of how many days of imports can you finance. So today we have roughly 7 months. Comfortable is actually 8 to 12 months. We should have enough foreign exchange to pay for 12 months. But in 1991, our foreign exchange reserves dipped to almost, it's like having zero balance in your bank account. And because of that, we had to have an emergency airlift of India's gold to Geneva to get some emergency loan, because not only did we have not enough foreign exchange, but nobody was willing to lend us money. And IMF came into the picture, but with a lot of danda. I mean, they put the screws on us, ki ye karo, wo karo, conditionality. So even in that crisis year, the current account deficit as a percentage of GDP was 3% or 3.1. This year, in 2013, which we just ended in March, it was 4.85%. So this is way above the crisis level. And still we are very happy here. I mean, we are unhappy that Infosys is not coming, but so this speaks something about the resilience of our economy, that despite the widening current account deficit, which was recognized as a serious problem, like you said, but still the current strength of the Indian economy is such that even at 5%, we are not facing the same situation like 1991. We are not the level of anxiety, level of panic, level of sense of catastrophe or sense of disaster is not whatever you may read in the newspaper. But fact is that we are a much more comfortable economy. In fact, like I said, we are growing at almost 5%, which is on a base where when we are twice as big as 2006, is not too bad. It could be much better, but it's not too bad. So I come to somebody said oil. So a really crucial thing that India cannot, why do we need foreign exchange? We are a large country, we have 1.2 billion people, we have 17% of the world population, we have all kinds of mineral resources in the country, we produce cotton, we produce food crops, we have self-sufficiency in most of the things. Then why? Well, the one thing that we don't have is oil. The one thing that we don't have is oil. And oil is a crucial ingredient in modern industrial economy. Without oil, you cannot survive. It's funny because the world has about 190 countries, but only about, I think, 20 or 30 countries produce oil. So we have to purchase oil from these guys. We have some oil. I mean, we have an oil company called ONGC, and we produce some oil in the northeast Assam. We produce some oil in offshore, off the shore of Bombay. But basically, we need huge amount of oil, and we need to import that. And when you import oil, the only currency we can pay for that oil is dollars. So unless you have dollars, you cannot buy oil. There is no country in the world which is going to give you oil without dollars. There is one country now which has been cornered, and that is Iran. But that's a different story. So if you need dollars to pay for your imports, where are the dollars going to come from? Either through exports, or you can borrow. You can take a loan from World Bank or commercial foreign banks, or you can perhaps you can sell something in you can say ki hamara stock market is for sale, come and buy. That is called FII, or you can have FDI. But basically, you need to find a way for dollars to come in. Why do you need the dollars? Well, fundamentally to at least pay for the oil. If not, there was a time in the 1950s and 60s we needed dollars not only to pay for the oil, but also for food. India was a net food importer. So it was a question of not only of driving your car or your trains. Trains used to they run on diesel, but also just surviving food. But thankfully we are those days are gone. So we are self-sufficient in food, but we still need oil. And our requirement of oil, by the way, is something like $120 billion annually. So if nothing else, we must produce at least $120 billion of foreign exchange every year. Actually, we are producing something like 300. So we are producing twice as much. But then in the meantime, all you young people, you have to have imported cell phones. So we not only have to pay for oil, you have to pay for all the other imports. And of course, in the meantime, because of liberalization, all the import tariffs are gone, all the doors are open, nothing is prohibited from you. You can import whatever you like so long as it's not illegal or RDX. So since those things have to be also catered, so our requirement for foreign exchange is much higher, and the only way you can have foreign exchange is these four ways. Either you should have something to export to the world, or you should be willing to sell some of your family property, which we call FII or FDI, or you should be able to go into debt with a begging bowl, which is called ECB, external commercial borrowing, or there is a fourth way, which is actually exports only. You can export people. See, one thing that India has lots of is people. Will you agree? In fact, we have more people than jobs. Sometimes it feels like it, doesn't it? Especially fellow MBAs, too many MBAs, sorry. So we export people, and we are the world's largest exporter of people. Did you know why? That is called export of labor. So India receives the world's highest income from remittances. That's called almost 60 or 70 billion dollars. Let me give you four numbers. These four numbers are 50, 50, 50, 50. Four numbers. 50, 50, 50, 50. It's like that ABC question. Choice A is X. Choice A is X. Choice A, B, C, D. All four choices are the same. Easy to remember. Four numbers. 50, 50, 50, 50. What are these four numbers? The amount of money we receive by selling software. That is software export earnings. $50 billion. The amount of money that NRIs or Indian labor sends back to India, remittances, $50 billion. The amount of money that we spend on import of something yellow and shiny, $50 billion. And fourthly, the amount of money or foreign exchange that India earns by not importing but exporting oil. How much is it? $50 billion. Did you know that? Actually, the numbers are not 50-50, but just to to kind of make it stick in your mind. The numbers are 55, 60, 65, 51. But for the sake of remembering, just remember them as all four numbers are the same. The amount of money that we spend on importing gold is the same that we earn by selling petrol and diesel. Next time, some of you may be going on your exchange student to France or I don't know, California maybe, and if you get a chance to drive the car and you go to the petrol pump to fill petrol, that petrol is made in India.